name's David Barker, and I'm so far been an artist all of my life, and I'm 75 years old. I was born in 1941 and born in England, and now live in New Zealand here in Devonport. And the time has come again when I decided to collect paintings for an exhibition, enough for an exhibition. When I'm painting, I see only very small parts of the painting at a time. I see it very clearly, and it's, I don't like to use the term necessarily, but it's quite abstract. So the principles of painting is what I'm looking at in a painting: the light, the dark, the big, the small, the sharp, the soft. The apparent randomness that you hear in a concert hall is in fact very concentrated and based on enormous practice. Same with painting. It looks easy, but only because it's practiced. It looks intuitive, but only because it's practiced. The exhibition is planned and will be centered on 2 bifold screens. The line drawings, fragments were brought together and assembled to make a composition of the screens themselves. So there was a conscious stopping and starting there, a transition, if you like, between the idea of the forms, the very geometric and precise forms of the shells and of the ships, and the very imprecise nature of the backgrounds of the screens. And that line drawing, the fragments assembled together into a composition, just like music really, a symphony. You know, start at the beginning and work to the end. Let's say the screens never came out the way I thought they would when I first conceived them, which is fine, because I had to go along with the growth of the screens, the way they developed, and the way they, in a way, led me because of the accidental and high-risk quality of them. So having a fixed idea was going to be a danger, because then the screens would become very rigid and, to me, lifeless. From these panels, the exhibition will continue, flow outwards if you like, in the form of what we call fragments. What you see here are fragments of paintings. Any painting for me has got a lot of paintings inside it. Any painting. So I can take many parts from a painting, and that itself can become a painting. As I would see some of these images now, parts of images that are being done. To start the paintings, a lot of water, watercolor, accidents, the hydrodynamics of paint. So the panels have to be perfectly level so the water doesn't run off them. And so that is the beginning of many of my paintings, is very accidental. And I enjoy or get a stimulus, an incentive from converting accident and haphazard and randomness into the precision of, for example, seashells or ships. The subjects of the two screens are seashells for one, and for the other screen, ships, sailing ships, steamships, and the forms of ships, the shapes of shells. So the screens are montages. They're not realistic scenes, they're components, and I can take individual components, fragments if you like, and make another painting. I usually photograph things that I don't paint, and I paint things that I don't photograph. However, when I'm doing the paintings, providing I don't have too much paint on my hands, I reach across and get the camera and grab what I call progressive shots of the works taking progress. And this is useful later when I look at these images. I think, well, often I think, why didn't I leave that painting there and then and step back and leave it? But I don't. I keep working on it and go into the painting mode, which discounts all other considerations. But the photograph, of course, freezes that moment of the work. Sometimes in the painting I have here now, 20 years ago I started that painting and I've just finished it now. So I don't have any problem with that, with the continuity of a painting progressing as I progress through life. Sometimes I can add to a painting. Very often I look at a painting and I think, I don't know how I did that, and I certainly won't want to change it. The principle of colour mixing was taught to me a long time ago, as was the principle of perspective. So I can put myself in any situation, in the sky, with some of these paintings, on the ground, where there is no ground, in a tree, without the tree being there. So that understanding that principle of perspective has allowed me to do that since I was very young. Shadows, to me, are a visual phenomena like reflections and refractions in water, and they're illusions. And so shadows are too. So you can see things in shadows. Shadows aren't a cover-up of something that's happening, a visual thing that's happening. So the idea of a shadow as an illusion of an interior space or an exterior space, those juxtapositions to me are all appropriate to painting. So now I find in the sky paintings that I have this constant illusion now, changing, no two the same, just like painting. It is very appropriate to painting, the subject of the forms and the spaces and the volumes in the sky. For many years I painted water and the illusion of water, and people would say, how do you get the depth of water and the transparency of it? And this is where cynicism comes in. I say, well, it's just by being around it all your life. And that's how you do it. If I was around racehorses all my life, I'd probably do pretty nice horses. But I don't. I like the accidental. I'm curious about the accidental process. So if I pour pigment and water onto a flat, smooth sheet of board, it resolves itself, sometimes over a period of several hours, into rocks in the bed of a stream in a way that I could never, nor could anybody else, ever paint. So it's actually a repetition of a natural process. And that natural process, with the tide coming in over a beach or something, over rocks, and receding, leaves a pattern that, to me, I'm not going to live long enough to reproduce it other than accidentally, or by reproducing that process of sedimentation, of wind, water, and so I use the elements as much as I can from nature natural phenomena in paint. So in that respect, for example, I don't use any white paint because it's not a colour. I don't use any black paint because that's not a colour either. I use on a white ground, which is the basis of the paintings, pure white, pretty daunting, an empty concert chamber. What am I going to do? Well, I really can't clearly see, and the paintings change direction as they go along, and I see the potential as a result of the accidents for a painting. The seashells, am I going to do this shape here as a shell, or am I going to do this one here? The pattern is already established in the abstract background. So that beginning is important to me. And it was taught to me very young when I was a watercolor painter, taught to me by my father. And the process of watercolor painting is, if it is watercolor painting and not just copying or coloring in, is very random and accidental and requires great virtuosity. And it always interested me that most students of art, of which I'm one, think they can start with watercolors because it's easy and then graduate to oil paint. Well, it's the other way around. Funny enough, the plane I was in was called a Dreamliner. Well, that was a good name because I was looking out the window, as I always try to do on any airplane, get near a window, and spend the whole time with the shutter up, which irritates my fellow passengers sometimes. But the view outside is often astounding, flying over Antarctica, over the Arctic, Greenland, Scotland, and so the aerial aspect has interested me, but now I can see it's not the land, the view of the land, although that does occur in the paintings of the clouds. You can see through the clouds. So the land gives it a perspective of being far away, and I'm high above it. So it is a change, but it's not as sudden or as contrived, because when I'm doing these paintings now, I realize I'm still painting water, vapor, volume, shapes, lights, darks, just as I am with the farmhouse up at Whangateiao. Shapes, colours, textures, patterns, and they occur in the sky. So these common denominators, if you like, or features, I like to describe in my paintings. They're usually quite still and non-threatening, although the plane is probably going 600 miles an hour. You can't tell that up there. Everything moves very slowly, and I like that too. That's one of the things that makes it appropriate to paintings which are very still. I'm quite a still person sometimes. But risk is a really important element in all performances, all creative performances. If there's little or no risk, I'm not staying for long anyway. So if it's in music, if there's high risk in the performance, a high possibility of real error, then I'm interested.